deserve to have the best physical, mental, spiritual, Zealous Wellness with Mike Hollis.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Zealous Wellness with Mike Hollis. I am your host. We are going to be talking, a lot of the things that I've already, really talked about is have a lot to do with, sports, obviously, as a kicker, a kicking coach, and just kind of the things that I've dealt with regards to, the kickers and mentality. And, a lot of stuff we refer to, mentally is like how you deal with pressure and problems and all that. And last week we talked about the levels of progression. And this week we're really going to focus on eliminating, the external factors, things that don't mean anything. So it's basically the process of elimination. So, there's I always talk about, I'm a huge fan of finding a process of a skill or anything you're doing in life. Obviously I always refer to kicking because that's where I've kind of got this mentality of this trusting the process sort of concept. But when you're eliminating, unnecessarily motions and movement, it's really the process of elimination. And in all reality, it kind of comes down to my thought process of kicking. So if you think about the amount of variables in one sort of kick, from the moment you move your feet on the first step to the actual kick of the ball, and then the follow through, and then all that whole process, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of variables, right? Well, I've always said that as kickers, we have enough pressure as is. All the eyes are on us. We have to really focus on what we're doing, and we know that everybody's watching us. There could be 80,000 people, 100,000 people in the stadium. Every one of them are looking at you. So you have a lot of pressure. So in order for you to deal with the pressure better, and I know this helps because I was living proof of that, is you want to simplify things. You don't want to be having to focus and think about a bunch of things, while you're trying to, just accomplish a certain skill. You want to, obviously the practice is where you're kind of honing in on the changing of the habits. So you're practicing this certain skill to change the habits that you've always, kind of done and maybe kind of ingrained. And so you're really formulating new habits. And then you trust those habits within the process itself. And so when you think about having too many variables or all these, things that you got to think about and do and moving parts, it makes that process more difficult because there's just more things you have to work on and master and create new habits for. I always refer to my kicking clients. Little Johnny, you're over there in the class across the hallway. We're in college or whatever, and you're over there. You've got a mathematical problem that's like the Rain Man. It takes up the entire chalkboard in this one problem, right? Yeah, I understand that's an incredibly gifted talent that people have to figure stuff out like that. But that is a lot of work. I'm over here in the classroom on the other side of the hallway, and I'm working on 2 + 2 = 4. It's that simple, right? So I always also refer to as juggling. If you had 3 tennis balls, you could juggle 3 tennis balls. But if little Johnny's over there in the corner juggling 20 tennis balls, who's going to have a better chance of mastering the juggle? Using 3 or 20 balls? It's obviously me using the 3 because there's a lot less moving parts. So the process of elimination is really important because you get to a position where you're going to discover a certain, what's right. And you just have to eliminate the parts of that process that aren't helping you at all. And in some cases, a lot of cases actually with the kicking side of it, they actually hurt the process. So we're going to get really deep into that. And I'm excited to talk about this because I'm really a big fan of, reverse engineering and just kind of, eliminating the things that don't matter. I'm going to go into a lot of mental side of it about worrying about stuff that doesn't matter, that nine times out of 10 doesn't happen anyway. So you just wasted all your energy on worrying about something. So we'll talk about all that when we get back after a quick word from our sponsor. We'll be back.
At 3, we want to give you the true health benefits that you're paying for, something you can feel and see a difference quickly. Each product is packed with powerful plant-based nutrients that are combined through a proprietary curation process and then infused with innovative cellular absorption technologies to ensure the nutrients absorb into the cells for maximum wellness. The quality and effectiveness of our life-changing products is evident by their approval to be included in the well-known Prescriber's Digital Reference, or PDR. PDR has been a valuable resource to the medical doctors and providers in the healthcare community for decades. Our products are GMO-free, clinically studied, and third-party tested, all designed to support health and proactive wellness for everyone.
All right, welcome back. And before we broke, I mentioned obviously the process of elimination, and it is you can insert any sort of thing in your life with this whole concept. Your diet, your job. Obviously, there's certain skills within your job that you're doing, but just in everyday life, finding different ways of doing things. I always refer back to days when my stepdad, I was growing up, and I was working on my old Camaro, my Camaro that I still have to this day. My parents bought it for me when I was 14 years old. And I remember there was a day out there in the garage, and I'm trying to take off this bolt, and I'm just struggling. I think I'm in high school at that point, or maybe, I was in high school, and, I'm lifting. So I'm kind of, I'm maturing. I've got all the testosterone. I'm just, I'm a man. I'm trying to be a man at least. Right. And so I'm out there, I've got this wrench on the bolt, and I'm just trying really hard. And stepdad comes in, and I'm like, I cannot get this bolt off. I don't know. We might have to hammer this thing out, or I don't know, drill it out or something. He goes, let me give it a shot. And he tried it the way I was doing it, and he clearly understood that the bolt was not going anywhere. And so he grabbed more or less an extension, like this iron tube, like a 1-inch thick iron tube. It was hollow in the middle, and he put that on the end of the ratchet. It gave more, longer leverage to the ratchet itself. And he just, with one arm, just popped the bolt loose. And I'm like, how in the world did you do that? He goes, it's all about leverage, man. You got to understand the simpler way of doing things, and simplify stuff, and not use so much of your energy. And I failed. I was putting every ounce of energy I had in that. And I'd like to say I was stronger than my dad at that point. I don't even know, but I'm thinking I am, at least. But he uses one arm with the longer, leverage, and a lever on the, basically having more leverage than I did on the shorter ratchet. And sure enough, popped that bolt. So again, it's simplifying the process, kind of understanding what works, what doesn't work, and just kind of being smart. But sometimes it comes with trial and error. But the bottom line really is, eliminating a lot of things that are not helping you. It'd be a different story if it was the opposite. If I was using a longer lever and he told me to shorten it up, eliminating the iron pole. But that was not the case in this scenario. But my point really is that there's a process of elimination. So really, I can think of an example when I tell kickers, don't go to these showcase camps before you're ready, because the recruiters in college and coaches and anybody that is looking to find athletes, they're all of them, and they're in the business of literally creating lists of talented athletes out in the world, and the second part of that list is actually eliminating names. And so that is a process of elimination. If I could come up with a better example, I would. But they're literally eliminating the guys that they do not want, and so they're in the business of scratching names off of lists. So if you think about that, it's a perfect example, a perspective of what I'm talking about. More so in a system. So obviously, if you refer to kicking, obviously, the process of eliminating, motions and movements that are irrelevant, first off, unnecessary. And so that's where I think that a lot of kickers out there, and again, I'm going to talk about more than just kicking. I know I do talk a lot about that, but that's my wheelhouse. And that's where I've learned a lot of stuff. And I've learned that a lot of stuff that I've kind of been able to achieve, and just certain methodologies and mindsets and all of that stuff that I did in football, that I learned in football and kicking, have translated into my real life story. It's things that I do on a real life basis. And so the process of eliminating parts and pieces that are irrelevant. I before the break, I mentioned worrying too much, because I'm telling you, 90% of the things that we worry about, now again, it just depends on the situation, of course, but a typical, day or something, if you got not, things that you're worried about, and you're stressed out and all that, if you can go back in time, or go back and think about what, the things that were bothering you one day and the things you're worried about, and think about how many of those actually came to fruition, how many of those actually came true. Maybe 10% of them actually happened. But we do waste a lot of time and energy on worrying about stuff that really more than likely is not going to happen. So that's another thing, that's kind of, it fits in along the lines of this process of elimination, because we're really kind of eliminating things that, and we should learn from our past experiences. If you sat there and worried about a certain subject or certain thing, not all of them are identical, but you have to remember, like, wait, I worried about that, 2 years ago, I had that same situation happen, and I worried a bunch about this, and it really didn't happen. So what am I worried about? Things change, of course, and things are a little bit different, but there could be some other variables that might make that certain situation, possibly come true. But you understand my point, is the fact that we're spending a lot of time and energy on things that we are worrying about, and when I refer to this process of elimination when it comes to a skill, it could be anything, like I mentioned before the break as well. Your diet. Process of eliminating sugars. It's a process, and you're trying to eliminate the sugars so you don't, you make your body more healthy and get rid of all the, it does ultimately create fat. Years ago, the food industry was they cracked down on the amount of food fat that was in food, and so they got real smart. They thought, well, fat tastes good, and so we got to find another way to keep people more or less addicted to our foods. So if we have to eliminate fats, we got to come up with something else to make people eat our foods that still make our foods taste good. May not be healthy, but we're going to do it. And again, my opinion about all that, and all these things that FDA approves, and just foods that are just, oh God, it's just awful. The ingredients that we have in our foods. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. My point is that, when you're really, it comes down to, the types of foods that these companies were making, and they replaced, really ultimately they replaced, the fat. They have to get rid of fat. Well, we're gonna put a bunch of sugar in there because sugar tastes good, and actually sugar is very addicting. So I know that I can't remember who it was, but there was somebody who was a main player in the tobacco industry, and had a way to make tobacco and cigarettes addicting, and so that same guy was hired by the food industry, big, large companies in the food industry, your Crafts and all those huge food corporations that that own a bunch of different not locations, but different brand names and foods and things like that. Well, they hired him to come up with solutions to make their foods addictive. They didn't care how healthy they were, because FDA will approve it, no big deal. There's no money in healthy people. So the FDA, I think, in my opinion, is kind of in bed with the government and big pharma and all these things. NIH, look at that. I'm not going to get political, but I believe she was the president or somebody really high up in the NIH. This chick happens to be, or she got fired from this position recently, but Dr. Fauci, Anthony Fauci's wife, was a head of the NIA. National Institute of Health. Wow, interesting. Now, she was just recently fired, but again, I don't want to get too political and go in circles here, but you understand my point, is that there's a lot of really bad things happening with our food industries and food industries and just things in general. But I'm getting definitely off track now. But the process of eliminating those crappy foods that these companies have been trying to addict us to, and they've been very successful for a lot of people. Not me. Not to say 100%. Clearly, I indulge in sweet stuff all the time. Not a lot of it, but I do have a sweet tooth. But that's a goal of mine, is to participate in this process of elimination by eliminating the sweets. And I don't need them. And yeah, they're kind of an instant gratification, but in the long term, they're not there's no gratification in that at all when you're getting all big and fat, because you're not eating good food. So any skill in life, anything that you're doing in general, if you're just gonna you want to, and again, going back to my point about the kicking aspect and simplifying the process, I'm a huge fan of making things a lot easier than you need to. That is a big misconception too. I want to really iterate that point too, especially in the kicking, world and kicking industry, and just the things that we coach as kicking coaches. I would say I'm really kind of referring to me, because there's a lot of coaches out there that teach a bunch of junk that not only are not really effective and have to master more of the movements and moving parts, but they're actually hurting the kicker's abilities to kick a ball and get as good as that kicker can be. And so I'm always in that constant mindset of trying to simplify a process, because when you simplify a process, if assuming you want to be real consistent with this process, maybe, obviously with kicking, the idea is to make it every kick that you put your foot on, right? You kick a field goal, you want to make the kick. Okay, well, that has a lot to do with being really consistent with the mechanics, right? Well, if you have a bunch of moving parts in those mechanics, you're going to have to be an incredibly good athlete and be really, spend probably more time than someone like me on that skill, because you have more moving parts to master. And again, the problem is where there's a lot of people, and again, this doesn't have to do with just kicking alone, but how many times have you gone to, and I'm a victim of this as well. You go into a situation where you got this, you got a new job or something, and you're really, your boss is giving you a project, and you're going to be, and if you're a perfectionist like me, that's kind of the, it's makes it even worse, honestly, because people who want to be perfectionists, we're gonna do a lot of things. We're gonna really, be really specific with a lot of stuff, and we're probably gonna add a lot of unnecessarily movements, emotions, and ideas and thought processes and things like that we don't really need, because we are perfect. And again, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. We are not perfect. We are perfectionists. We're perfectionists. We're perfect wannabes. Put it that way. It'll never happen. Nobody is ever perfect. But with regards to just the process of all this stuff, when you're thinking of things that you're trying to achieve, you got a project your boss just gave you, and you want to be real you want to impress them. You just got a new job, and so you're going to work really, really, really hard to make this project as perfect as possible. And in reality, if you were to fast forward 10 years from then, you'd be like, why did I do all that stuff on this project? It could have been done so much easier. And so when we think about, adding a lot of variables to a project, we think we're doing good stuff, and it makes us feel good, because, man, especially if you're a perfectionist and you think, man, oh man, this is going to turn out great. Well, in the long run, when you kind of think about it, it boils down to just the concept of really trying to be, perfect with it, and trying to just, have everything just ideal and perfect. And in all reality, there are probably things within that project that you did that probably didn't even need to be included. Maybe you're in college, and you're doing like an essay or something, and you've made it, they put a limit on the words, maybe, but again, the people who are not eliminating any extra stuff that doesn't need to be in there. And I'm a victim of that as well. I tend to elaborate and go way too much. If I'm giving someone directions, man, forget it. I'm going to tell you to turn to the left of the red house, and then you're going to go exactly 0.6 miles down. Man, I'm bad. I'm real bad, because it's just me. I'm just dialed in on, I want details. And so I kind of portray that to people. And I think, oh, they must want details too. And they really don't. And that's another word I'll throw in there is, when you get too detailed with stuff, you've got too many things that you're trying to, accomplish or, put together to make the project, work or successful. You have to understand that it could be just as successful with half the parts or half the information. There's probably a reason why when professors put a limitation on an essay, it can't be more than 5,000 words. Well, I know you want to do 10,000 words or 20,000 words, but we only want 5,000. So you got to be pretty good with simplifying, what you're trying to portray. So that's the thing with skills, and whether they're physical skills, whether they're mental skills, whether you're, the way you think, even just eliminate a lot of the things that you think about. You can really simplify your life if you just became more of a simple person. I've really become more of a simple person, and I know that, even playing the NFL. And I was thinking about this before the podcast, like, what am I going to talk about when it comes to, and these are things that I'm constantly thinking about all the time, but when it comes to, like, I kind of thought of the idea, but that how much stress I had when I was playing the NFL, when I had a lot of money in toys. I had at one point, I think, three houses. I think I might have had a condo too. Call it four houses, call it what you want. I don't know, maybe three or four cars, five cars, maybe count my Camaro I still have, maybe six cars. I don't know. But my point is, I had a boat, I had a jet ski, I had, all these toys, but that just added more stress, more things on my plate that I had to really focus on and take care of. And when a problem arises, and of course, the more things you have, the more responsibilities you have. It's not all what's cracked up to be. So you people out there watching that are, I can't wait to get rich and buy all these fun things and be, I'm gonna spend money on all kinds of, cars and houses. And be careful what you wish for, because that's going to add a lot of stress, and it can hinder marriages. It did mine. We my ex-wife and I, hence the ex part, but there was other things going on too. But with regards to just kind of dealing with things in general, we had to talk about the money that had to go out to spend. We had to fix the boat, and we can't really do that right now. We had the investment we were going to do, and this. Well, okay, so we get into issues with that. But again, when you become more simple, and that's really I was trying to get to the point where now fast forward 20 something years, 20-ish, around 21 years or so since I've retired from football, and gotten rid of a lot of those toys I used to have, and primarily I really couldn't afford to keep. I had a Porsche that was really nice, but I didn't want to. Not that I couldn't afford it at the time. I just didn't want to spend the money, which is budgeting. It's being smart with my money, because I wasn't making nearly the money I was when I was playing. So I got to eliminate some things. And the annual service fee on a Porsche 911 twin turbo was, gosh, I don't know, $6,000 or something. It was expensive. Not to mention the tires. Went through tires pretty quickly, I know. So I'm like, got to be realistic and say I can't afford, which I could, but maybe not not much longer. If I held on that car for 10 years and made the money I did at the time, I probably would have ran out of money trying to maintain a car. Not really, but my point is that it really is. It simplify things, and obviously you're going to save money in the process. So it's not always as cracked up to what it sounds like. Don't ever think that these people that have all these fun things and all responsibilities that it's always just a cakewalk for them, because not all the time. Maybe some guys are really good at it and they can handle those kind of things, and they're smart, and they've done it all their lives and it doesn't bother them. Great, kudos to them. But I was not one of them at all. I was a young kid, had a bunch of toys, and yeah, I didn't want to, learn everything about everything at the time, because I was having fun and, playing with the toys that I felt, that I earned, but I learned to, through the process of elimination, that I had to get rid of things that didn't really, make me happy or didn't really matter. I didn't have to have that Porsche. It was fun while I had it. It's fun while I could afford it. I don't look back and say, oh man, I wish, investment wise, I wish I would have held on to it, because the value of that car went up quite a bit. It doesn't normally happen in cars, but that was the last air cooled version of the Porsche made. And so the value went up quite a bit. Oh gosh, maybe 10 years after I sold mine, and the value went up to, it was a good 100, almost 100%. Like it was incredible. Like, wow, I could have doubled my money. But hindsight is 2020, obviously. But my point is, really getting back to my point. I know I do again get sidetracked, but my point really is, that process of elimination. Get rid of things that are unnecessary, that can hinder what you're doing. You have to actually know what they are too. That's another side of the story too, that people don't realize, is that you have to kind of understand, and acknowledge the things that are not helping you. And that comes with experience. I know last week when we were talking, I know that simplifying the process and just kind of getting into those kind of subjects. I know that we were talking about how much easier it gets, and you don't really realize until obviously going through the experience is what I'm referring to. Having the experience of learning through the proper processes. We talked about the ladders. We can show you the ladder that takes you up to the top of the building, even though you can't see the top of the ladder. This one, we're telling you, this one goes up, and these kids want to take these other ones because they think they know the right way. So that that my point really again is that fact that that there's a process that is right, and we have learned it. We have gone through the trial and error for you. So again, that took time. It takes the time to go through those things and learn I've always kind of been a trial and error kind of person. I've told you guys this before. I'm self-taught on a lot of house things and just general stuff. I'm not self-taught in my profession by any means. I was taught my kicking skills and the things I'm doing now with it, 3 Proactive Wellness. I didn't come up with a lot of things that I've talked about in that company, and just I've learned a lot, which is great. So yeah, I've dabbled in a lot of little things, but I've learned in the process, of course. So getting back to the reality of simplifying the process and the process of eliminating extra motion movements, parts, pieces, things like that. It makes it easier. And you will understand, of course, again, going back, I think you need to really know, through your experiences. And if you don't know what things are good and bad and what you need to get rid of, then maybe there's some, people you need to rely on and, kind of lean on, ask questions, ask professionals who have done that. And, how many times have you seen, I've seen on social media, these people just walk around, they see these guys, getting out of these really fancy cars, and they've got their little microphone and little camera guy following them and say, hey, hey, do you mind just asking, I'm going to ask a couple questions. Like, what do you do? And, they like, oh yeah, I do this. And well, how did you make all the money? Well, this, through this. And would you mind give us a couple tips? I've got followers and blah, blah, blah. And they're these wealthy people are very honest and they're giving. They want to do the, give some advice. And so what I'm referring to is they're giving advice to these people about how they made the money. And a lot of times you're going to see that they're not complicated. They're very simple things that these guys are talking about. It's just maybe something you never thought of, or you never thought that getting rid of certain things would make that much of a difference. It's funny when you think about, again, going back to the perfectionist in us. If you are those type of people, much like me, you get caught up into wanting to master so many things and know everything about everything, and you really don't. And so I'm telling you through personal experience, whether it's your diet, whether it's your mindset, if you eliminate thoughts, how about that? Eliminate negative thoughts. I'm still a victim of that. I've got some issues where I need to think about things. I've had some things happen to me in the past that linger, and I think that those are still there, and I got to remember and not worry about some things, and kind of remember, myself, and catch those things. When I think about those things, I think about how many times I was wrong about the situation. And obviously, if something pops up that's similar to some things I've done or I've thought about in the past or questioned in the past, is another thing too. You can get caught assuming. But if you're questioning things that you've kind of dealt with before, maybe with the same person or the same, boss or subject or any, same scenario, it doesn't have to be a person, it could be anything. If it's something similar that you remember, that's what I'm saying. You got to remember these past experiences and think to yourself, what happened last time I thought about this? Well, actually, if I think about it, nothing bad happened. It was actually, I was wrong. And man, I've been wrong a lot. And I'm still to this day wrong about a lot of things. But again, it's like that failure one. You're talking about, you're never failing. You're just learning. We're learning from mistakes. And so you can't succeed in life if you don't fail. I don't even know how that's even possible. How you can be a success in life if you never fail. If you never fail, that must mean you're perfect and you know everything about everything. So I don't think that's even possible. I know we're not all perfect, but I don't think there's anybody out there that was just born that knows everything about everything, because clearly we have to learn as we grow up as kids, So it's a process of learning through, trial and error, personal experiences. But the memory part is important, because, you need to know what to eliminate. You need to remember what things that you were worried about, what things you ate. How about that? What gave you that stomach ache? Like, God, every time I eat Panda Express, I have to visit the toilet every single time. It's like awful. But I don't go to Panda Express anymore. And they say, oh, no MSGs. I'm like, I don't know about that, or whatever. But my point is, I've learned. It might have taken me a while, and I might have been a little stubborn because I liked it so much. But I learned, it's not worth it anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. So you learn through trial and error. You learn what things to eliminate. It's a huge, everything is if you want to get as close to mastering anything in life in general, just any aspect, like I mentioned, skill, physical skill, mental, thought process, your diet, anything that you you have kind of an idea that you've experienced, you really have to understand that there's probably a simpler way of doing things, and just kind of getting back to what is right, and simplifying the process has everything to do, especially if it's a successful process. I'm a firm believer, clearly, of simplifying the process for the kicking aspect, because you want to you don't want to have to master a bunch of movements and parts to be as consistent as possible. You want to minimize those moving parts, right? So that's a huge thing for me. But I'm relating that into everyday life. Your diet, like, you've got to eliminate things that made you feel bad, or maybe I noticed, one of the things that I noticed a little bit more inflammatory issues. I started to feel a little bit more pain when I was doing this fast. And I was like, well, is it because I'm not eating food? What is it? What kind of foods that I'm eating that actually have anti-inflammatory properties? But I noticed the inflammation kind of went up a little bit when I just finished a 100-hour fast. I didn't eat any food. And so I noticed some things in my body. And so those are the things I keep referring to. You have to kind of notice these things, write them down if you have to, and always refer to them at later dates. But that's life is, a process. And so when you want a simple life, it's you want to eliminate and the things that don't matter, don't make you a better person, the things that make your life more miserable. I don't say that where it's a kind of a nasty way of saying it, but things that make your life more complicated. Put it that way. If you've got a complicated life and you don't want it, well, you have to eliminate things. You have to simplify it. So there's nothing wrong with being a simple person. That's the thing too that I've kind of thought to myself and battled with, trying to, what do people respect people like me, or do they respect, am I looked at as someone who, they don't respect me because I'm not a professional in certain fields of my life. I just kind of do a little bit of everything, and I'm simple about all those things. Is that something? I don't care. I really don't. That's the thing with me, is that one thing you got to know about me is I could care less what you think about me. You don't pay my bills. There's a lot of things you don't do for me. Obviously, I'm saying, in general, that people don't need people's opinions. And I'm telling you, the ones that want to disrespect and have opinions about you in a negative fashion, well, they don't know you very well then, wow, what was that saying I just heard? That was a pretty good one. It had something to do with the haters. Said, if anyone who's a hateful person, they're never going to be good, as good as you or better than you. You will always find your haters are never as good as you. Well, think about that for a second. They're hating on you. Maybe they're jealous. They want to be you. They want to be as good as you. It's whatever it is they're hating on. I don't know. But I don't know if that was exactly the same, the quote I heard. It was David Goggins, I think, that had mentioned it. Somebody did, but recently. But that's my point, is really just simplifying the process and just being a simple person. I'm living the best life because I'm simple. And again, maybe it came from my personal experience of being complicated back when I had all those toys and money, and things became complicated, and it had a lot of stress. Then you get into that whole concept of worrying too much about certain things, and so it's a vicious cycle. Okay, now I know that there's people that can handle those toys and money and all that way better than I did. But with regards to just me, everyone, we're all different. I think it's whatever. If you ever want to get a good picture about a culture or a part of the country, people that live in Australia, go visit Australia and just see how they live. I was there 9-10 years ago, and I knew it. I'm half Australian to begin with. My mom's side of the family is Australian. So, I definitely, I fit right in, because I was like, I have this mentality right now, being the kicker of simplifying that, and then having all those toys, money, and all that. I got to eliminate those kind of things to make the me less stress. And so I kind of had that idea going in to my visit in Australia, and I saw they were the same way. Must be just a Australian thing. It must be in my blood already. I don't know, but it's just they enjoy their lives. They don't spend their money on fancy cars, and they're not materialistic type of people. Yeah, real estate's probably the most expensive thing over there, and it's expensive. Don't get me wrong, but when people in Australia, when they're working for a living, making money, they do spend a lot of their time, their time off, their holiday. Okay, that's what they call it, a holiday. When they go holiday, they go visit family, and they go other countries, and they get real life experience with the money they make. They don't buy materialistic things. Okay, I love that concept. That's a really awesome concept, because it makes you just, it's life. It's real life. There's no, we talked about my girlfriend and I. We're talking about narcissists, and we've dealt with a lot of them in both of our lives, and they're never happy. You look up narcissists, and they're just never happy. And so I feel sorry for people like that. But I really, I would think for me to be happier is being real simple, and just going with the flow. Maybe one day I'll live somewhere in the Bahamas or some on the beach, and have my umbrella drinks, or whatever. But definitely want to make sure that I'm living a simple life, and through the process of eliminating things that don't matter, that add stress, that make things more complicated. That's really where I want to go. And I want to simplify my life with those kind of things in mind. And so I think that's some good advice based on my experience. Again, so take it for what it's worth, but I can promise you through my own experiences, the process of eliminating extra things that add more stress and things like that it's very much worth it to just be a simpler person and enjoy your time on Earth. And so with that said, I'm going to stop the show tonight, and we're going to look forward to seeing you guys next week. But think really heavy about that. Think about the things in your life that don't necessarily matter, and what could you do without. How would it be? And again, it might be a trial and error again. Think about that. And so kind of learn how things go. And I wish a lot of luck for that, because I can tell you that it does work. It's a process, but I can promise you'll be happier in the long run. So with that said, we will see you guys next Monday night at 5:30. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you for watching Zealous Wellness with Mike Hollis. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. See you next time.